Hey guys, today we're going to learn the basics of shape layers in After Effects. Shape layers are very powerful, that can also get pretty complicated. Let's get started. Go ahead and make a new composition. I'm just using the 1080-24 preset, about 30 seconds long. Hit OK. So there's two ways to make shape layers. The first is you can use the shape tools up here. The default is the rectangle, but there's also rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon tool, and star tool. Let's just grab the default rectangle tool and just draw a shape. And you'll notice this just adds a new shape layer. The icon is a little star and it defaults to a blue color in your timeline. The other way to make a shape is to grab the pen tool. So you can grab it right here or use the keyboard shortcut G and you just start dragging Bezier curves around and you have a shape layer. Now there is something tricky about shape layers that you should know about. If you have no other layer selected and you start to draw, you will make a new shape layer. But if you have a non-shape layer already selected, you will draw a mask instead. Context is key with these tools. All right, so let's make a shape and start messing with it. I'm just going to start with the rectangle tool and just draw a shape. You can always hold down Shift too to make sure it's a perfect square. Now you'll notice it's made a new shape layer in our timeline. And in addition to the normal transform properties, this layer also has a contents menu. And underneath that, you'll see rectangle 1. Let's go ahead and twirl that open and see what's inside. So there's a couple of options here. Underneath rectangle path, you'll notice there's a couple of options here, including size, position, and roundness. Roundness will round the corners of your shape. I'm just going to leave that at 0. If you look under stroke, there's a couple of options here, including color, opacity, stroke width, etc. Let's go ahead and add a stroke to start to see what some of these properties do. And you can do that by clicking the stroke up here and just clicking the swatch and just picking a color. I'm just going to pick white, hit OK. You can keyframe things like the stroke width, as well as opacity and color, as well as you can change the settings of butt cap, round cap, or projecting cap, which isn't really relevant to a square right now. Let's go ahead and draw another shape using our pen tool. Just kind of a whatever. And you'll notice how it's kind of flat on the ends here. Well, if we go into shape 1 and go into that stroke setting and then change the butt cap to round cap, you'll notice it creates these rounded caps, just like the name, and projecting caps, which is just like a butt cap, but it protrudes past the end of the stroke. So let's go ahead and just collapse shape 1 and delete that and go back into rectangle 1 for now. Down here under dashes, if you click the plus, it's going to add dashes to your stroke, and you can change a couple of the settings here, including dash, which is kind of how thick the dashes are and how much gap there is between them. You can also offset them and kind of animate them rotating around your square, kind of like a bunch of ants. And if you click the plus button again, you'll get a gap setting where you can fine-tune the gap between your dashes. If we keep pressing plus, you just get more dashes. I'm going to minus that till we get rid of the gap. Okay, let's collapse stroke and path for now and open up the fill settings. And underneath here, you can do things like keyframe the color. So if I keyframe purple on frame 1 and go to frame whatever this is on about 2 seconds and change the color to blue, you'll watch it turn color. Pretty cool. Same thing with opacity as well. You can keyframe opacity independent of the other fills or strokes. And underneath here, we have transform properties specifically for rectangle 1. Now you may ask, why would I want transform properties for rectangle 1 when I have my normal layer transform properties right here? Say you have a shape layer and you drew a few more rectangles on here. Now we have 4 rectangles, and if we go to our transform properties for the whole layer, the position, for example, takes all of those squares and starts moving them around. But if we go into rectangle 1, we can animate that layer's position independently. I'm just going to delete the rest of these rectangles and just go back to our single rectangle. Now guide your eyes up here to this little add button and click that. You'll notice there's a few options here. Let's go through them. First off, there's groups. So you can drag the group out of the side of the rectangle, for example. And let's say I use Command D or Control D to duplicate this a few times. I have a couple of rectangles and I just want to organize my shape layer a little bit. I can drag them into a group, keep them organized, kind of like folders. I'm just going to Command Z till those are all gone. There's also a few options for adding new shapes to a shape layer without having to draw them. And down here, you'll notice you can add fill, stroke, gradient fill, and gradient strokes to shape layers. So let's say I wanted a gradient fill, I could click that, and then it creates a gradient here on my shape layer. And then if you twirl these down, you'll find all the settings here for your gradient. So you can change the start and end point, you can edit the colors of the gradient, etc. I'm just going to delete that and keep my default color fill. And down here are some of your modifiers, and this is where some of the exciting stuff happens. So, say for example, we use the twist. If I go in here and start messing with this, you can kind of do this kind of swirly animation. It's pretty cool. We also have stuff like pucker and bloat, which does kind of this kind of thing to it. You can make some pretty crazy trippy shapes with this, doing some kaleidoscope kind of stuff. There's also zigzag here, which kind of creates a kind of a noisy kind of look, kind of like audio spikes. All right, so this has been fun, but let's actually make something cool. I'm going to go ahead and delete my shape layer here. First, I'm going to go ahead and make a new background by using Command or Control Y. I'm just going to create a, kind of a yellowish background here. And let's go ahead and deselect this. Remember, if you have another layer selected and try to draw a shape, you'll just draw a mask instead. So make sure you have no layers selected before you draw a shape layer. So I'm going to hold this down and select my ellipse tool. I'm just going to draw an ellipse kind of in the middle here. Just going to kind of sort of center that in my comp. I'm going to delete the stroke. I can go ahead and click the name stroke up here and just choose none, hit OK. And then for fill color, I'm going to change this to just a slightly darker yellow, kind of like that. Okay. And now I'm going to twirl open my ellipse properties. Under path, I'm going to just make this a little smaller. I don't like it so big. And I'm going to add one of the effectors. It's called repeater. And what this does is it just creates duplicates of your shape layer, however many copies you want, depending on how many settings you have. I'm just going to turn this to like something crazy like 100. And under the transform properties of repeater, I'm just going to change some of these settings. It defaults to 100, 0, so it will move over 100 pixels before making a new repeat. But obviously our ball is a little bigger than that, so I'm just going to drag this up till it's spaced out kind of nice. That looks pretty good. And now we're going to get a little crazy here. We're going to duplicate the repeater by using Command or Control D. Twirling open repeater 2 properties, going to the transform, and changing X to 0 under position, and then Y to 170, which is I think what the other one was, wasn't it? 173, pretty close. I'm just going to make those the same. All right, there we go. Look at this. We just made a grid pattern. Pretty cool. I'm going to press R to open up rotation for the whole layer and just rotate these 45 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to set a keyframe on frame 0. I'm going to zoom out here, and I'm going to move my, oops, come here. Come on, stop scaling. All right, screw it. I'm just going to use these. So I'm going to make this animate just a little bit. I'm going to go forward to about 10 seconds. I'm just going to use Shift and the arrow keys to move this over. And then maybe down a little bit. How far down can I go before I find the edge? About there. Okay. So now if I press 0 on my numpad to do a RAM preview, you'll notice that I just have a kind of a cute animated background here of polka dots. Kind of cool. So the repeater is pretty powerful. Next, I'm going to select the type tool, and then I'm going to write out some type, and I'm just going to write fresh smoothies. Okay. Now, quick tip here. If you go to Window, you can select Align, and this will open up this Align panel, and you can click some of these buttons here to align your layers and center it in your comp super quick. In fact, I'll give you another tip. If you grab your pen tool and start drawing a mask on your text layer, but don't close it, I'm just going to draw this little arc kind of shape like that, kind of this swirly kind of look. but I'm not going to close the mask. And now when I twirl open the text layer, and I go into Text, Path Options, and select Mask 1 as my path, I can now write my text along my path. Pretty cool. I'm going to just dial this in to where I like it. Something kind of fun. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Anyway, go ahead and right-click on your text and select Create Shapes from Text. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a shape layer that outlines your type. So you'll notice down here, it's turned off the eyeball for my text layer, Fresh Smoothies, and it created a new shape layer. And then if I twirl open the timeline here, you'll notice that it broke out each letter as its own shape, and I can hide them individually. Great, so what does this do for us? Well, now that your type is a shape layer, you can add all those crazy modifiers that you could find under the Add menu down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the repeater and make a long shadow from the type. So what I'm going to do is select my outlines. I'm going to duplicate them using Command or Control D. In this top layer, I'm going to hit Enter and rename this top layer. And this one I'm going to call Shadows. Okay, I'm going to twirl open Shadows here. I'm going to click Add, Repeater. And if I twirl open the repeater here, by the way, you can add repeaters to individual groups here of letters, or you can apply them to the whole contents menu kind of in the open, and it's going to apply to all of these. So remember, where you put effectors matters. So you'll notice it's just kind of created this weird mirrored sort of noisy mess. So we're going to change this a little bit. I'm going to open up Transform for repeater 1. And what this is doing is it makes a repeat every 100 pixels over and 0 pixels Y. So to make a smooth, even shadow, I'm going to change this to 1, 1. And you're not going to see much right now, but I'm going to change the fill color of the shadows to something different that we can really see here. And OK. And then I'm going to crank the copies from 3 to something pretty high, like 150. Hey, that looks pretty good. So what it's basically doing is every time it makes a new repeat, it moves it down 1 and over 1 pixel. So it creates this smooth edge, or at least as smooth as pixels can get. Now, like if I set this to like 5, 5, you'll notice like here on the S especially, you get like the stair-steppy kind of look. But if we set it back to 1, 1, that guarantees like a smooth transition. So if we go back to 100%, looks super nice. And so what we can do is we can keyframe this to where we keyframe copies and start at 0, and then maybe we go to 2 seconds, set this to 150. And then we can right click it, go to Easy Ease In, go to our graph editor and pull this out holding Shift, go back to our timeline. Now if we 0 RAM preview, and there you go, we have this cool animated long shadow effect that kind of grows out from your type, as well as a neat background that we made using only one shape and clever use of the repeater function. Anyways, that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something new.